Hello, everyone, and welcome to what is our final Pathfinder 2 panel of Gen Con 2019. Hello, everybody. I should clarify, that's not our final Paizo panel of 2019.
It's our final panel.
It is our final. It's Sunday. We don't really know what's happening anymore. It's been a crazy couple of days, and I have to admit, this show has blown away all of our expectations. It has really been an amazing time. So we thought we would take an hour here on Sunday to just kind of relax, talk about the philosophy of the game and where we're going from here. By now, I expect many of you already have the game. Is there anybody here who hasn't bought Pathfinder Second Edition? Because we can hold the panel. There's a booth right across the way. No,
there's like no line.
Yeah, no, you can walk right up and get what you need. So what we're going to be doing here today is talking a little bit about how we made Pathfinder Second Edition and what that structure, what the way that we built it, what it means for the future. So
I'm a little curious though of a second question. Now that we're on the last day, how many of you have had a chance to play Pathfinder Second Edition sometime at Gen Con?
It's a good number.
So it's a good number, but a good number haven't.
Yeah.
Good to know.
So yeah, that's what we're going to be doing here today, and we're going to leave as much time as we can for a little bit of Q&A at the end. Now that we have gotten past the 2019 and Beyond seminar, we can also talk a little bit about the announced Bestiary 2 and the Advanced Player's Guide, which we announced yesterday. That'll be coming out next year with a playtest in October.
I brought my cheat sheet of all the products so I can keep them straight.
Nice, nice. It wouldn't surprise me if actually we ended up skipping one or two of those in the rush because we went so fast to make that panel happen yesterday. Next year, that's going to be a 2-hour, I think.
You didn't catch all like 18?
God help us. Yeah, it's going to be like, yeah, this is, and then we're releasing this dinner napkin.
I heard it made it to the 45 point and you hadn't announced anything except for the near space that had not already been announced.
When we got to the Advanced Player's Guide, I think I had negative 2 minutes left in that panel.
Good
we were already over time. So let's start out talking a little bit about how we built this game, what the philosophy was behind it, and I don't want to belabor that point too much, but we'll then use that to go into the future. So the one thing I'll throw on the wait, we should announce ourselves. Hi, I'm Jason Bowman. I'm the director of game design at Paizo. Oh, it's Sunday. This is always the worst. Don't record these.
It's live streamed.
Stop watching.
Every time. Hi, I'm Jason Bowman. I'm the director of game design at Paizo.
I'm Logan Bonner. I'm a designer at Paizo.
Mark Seifter, designer at Paizo. And together we're 3 of the 4 leads for Pathfinder Second Edition.
That is correct. So the thing I'll throw on the pyre before I toss it over to my compatriots here to talk a bit more about the design philosophy is that the one thing that was one of my guiding principles for this game when we started from the very beginning was to look at all of the various systems in the game and identify those that were all trying to do the same work. Right? And say, why do we have 7 systems doing the same thing? That doesn't make any sense. There's a lot of examples of this. And, the goal here was to take those systems and unify them in a way that makes it easier for everyone to understand, easier to learn, and easier to teach to new players. So, for example, we realized that, if you wanted to customize your character, more than just, oh, I picked this skill over that skill, but really like I want to add these class features to my character. We had 3 distinct ways in first edition that we did that, right? We could multi-class, we could add a prestige class, or we could add an archetype. Well, those are 3 things all trying to do the exact same thing. They do them a little differently. They all had a different structure for it. But fundamentally, they were all doing the same thing. So that's why in second edition, that's one system, that's just archetypes. We looked at the various math formulas. We had things that were scaling at, 1 per level, things that were scaling at 3/4 per level, things that were scaling at half per level, things that were scaling at half plus 2, things that were scaling at 1/3. And we had all these formulas basically trying to tell you this is how good you are at a thing, but they all did it differently. It's like, why are we doing that? That's not exactly the most elegant way to make that happen. So that's why proficiency exists, because it's one system to describe how good you are at everything which makes it easier for us to judge, easier for us to balance rules around, and most importantly, easier for all of you to understand. So I think, whenever we went into the game, that was one of my biggest guiding principles, but I'll let each of you talk about what was really driving some of your design.
One of the things for me that is really important is making sure that your decisions matter and they really feel like they matter. And so one of the things that I didn't like as much in Pathfinder 1 was there were a lot of things that kind of felt like a foregone conclusion, especially like my skill bonus has gotten so high that I don't really need to roll anymore, and that kind of thing. And well, I might as well do this because there's no cost to doing it, there's no risk to doing it. I really like it when any choice can spin the story off in an interesting direction. So one of my biggest focuses was in things like the skill checks, having it mean that something really interesting is going to happen, potentially even if you fail, that there is, it takes actions to do some of the identify creatures and that kind of thing, so that you aren't just kind of saying like, well, I'm going to do these 8 things and then do my actual actions, that kind of stuff. So getting more important choice and fewer kind of preordained decisions was one of my big.
And getting rid of those meaningless freebies. Like whenever you saw a monster and everybody tried to roll a die, it was like, oh, I can try religion. And I mean, I'm not good at it, but I'll try it. Maybe I'll get a 20. And all of a sudden the game just ground to a halt because everybody wanted to make a check. It's one of those things that I think when we see people play, they immediately kind of look at it and they're like, oh, I missed the free check. And I'm like, yeah, you do now.
Take that feat and you'll get the free check.
Yeah. Well, and you can take a feat and have the free check, but that feat indicates that you have spent so much time studying this that the knowledge comes to your mind immediately. That makes sense. And it really does prevent play from just grinding to a halt every time something weird appears.
Especially if 6 PCs are at your table, which is the sort of the standard in organized play and a lot of tables out there. And there's 5 different kind of monsters. That's 30 checks that you have to adjudicate instantly.
It's really exciting. Yeah.
And skill ranks are another one that's kind of similar to that, because a lot of times, you'll get 7 ranks, but a whole bunch of those are kind of foregone conclusions, if not all of them. So like the way we did skill increases is kind of so you can say, and this is when I decisively get better at thievery.
So for me, my background's in computer science before game design, and it's very tied to what Jason said for his philosophy, but it's really important to have modularity in the game, because Pathfinder First Edition is a system I deeply love. I loved it enough to leave my degree and come to Paizo to work on it. And unfortunately, though, does have one weakness, which is it's kind of like computer code that, you kind of wrote it, you didn't document it, you added more modules onto it. And now if you remove a line, 5 things could break somewhere else, especially if it's not, the person who wrote the code. So with Second Edition, by making things more modular and by, like Jason said, making things work so you learn it once and it works across the game, what it really means is that you guys can not only understand it more easily, not only play it more easily, but if you want to mod the game, because that was something I was big into when I was a player in GM, it's easy enough to do that without needing to have like a whole big Pathfinder Unchained where we spend a lot of hours figuring it out. So for example, in Pathfinder First and Pathfinder Second Edition, we tell stories where a 20th level fighter is going to probably kill 1,000 first level fighters if you put them in a room with those 1,000. But in some fantasy novels, like in The Wheel of Time, there's a sword master named Lan who gets ambushed by 8 bandits on the road. He says, I can tell they're all trained soldiers before they became bandits. I'm probably going to die. That's 8 against 1. Someone's going to slip past my guard. If you want to tell that story in Pathfinder First, well, you probably need one of us to figure out how to change the math to get that to work. In Second, Jason talked about the unified proficiency, which is trained is your level +2, expert is your level +4, master is your level +6, and legendary is your level +8. Remove that level from everything. And do you have any weird side effects? Not really. The only effect you have is the one you wanted, which is the 8 bandits on the road are a much more deadly threat for the higher level character. And conversely, that one big dragon is a smaller threat because your PCs are the 8 bandits on the road attacking the dragon. So
Let's be honest, your PCs were always the 8 bandits on the road.
probably.
So, you know, I think one of the big things that I want to kind of get across, because it's not necessarily obvious in the book, right, is we built these things this way for a lot of reasons. One of the big ones was just, hey, this game is now easier for you to learn. It's easier to teach to new players. It's better at the table. It makes for a more cinematic narrative experience. But there are other reasons as well, and some of those have to do with the future, which is something I definitely want to talk about in this panel. So I would say that, like, you know, looking back over 10 years of Pathfinder First Edition, we certainly built a lot of things to go onto the game, but they were all kind of bolt-on things. It was like, here's the core of the game, and now we add this, but we're just bolting it on. The system never knew that was going to exist, so the best we could do is just kind of strap it to the hole with a bunch of duct tape and call it good.
The cleric was not ready to gain archetypes.
Yeah,
right. It's not built.
Well, and that's exactly the perfect example, is that archetypes are this cool, amazing thing that everyone loved. I mean, unless you were like a cleric or a wizard, because you basically didn't get any. You had a few. I'm not saying there were none, but there were not many.
And they tended to be ones that people online either said were like kind of weak because there wasn't much to trade out, or kind of overpowered because they just got stuff and they didn't trade out almost anything for it. There were not very many archetypes online that people said, no, yeah, that's a really exciting, interesting, and balanced trade.
Yeah,
for cleric.
Yeah, so I mean, what you ended up with is a number of systems that were added to the game, but they weren't added holistically. With Second Edition, we were able to kind of look at all the systems we had built for First Edition, kind of tried to dream forward into the future, and made sure that the new system would accommodate them well, even if they're not there right now. I mean, the core rulebook has 12 multi-class archetypes in it. I mean, you all know we're going to do a lot more of those. Archetypes are awesome. Everybody likes them. The Advanced Player's Guide we announced yesterday is going to contain 60 pages worth of archetypes. That's a lot of archetypes. That's probably close to 60. We try and do them one a page. I don't know that we'll hold.
I think a fair number will be 2 per page. We have written a lot for other books. There's a lot of 2s. There's a lot of 1s. It won't be 60.
Yeah, I think yesterday I said 60 without adding the word pages to the end. So okay. I want to clarify that. But
that's very important, everyone. Tell your friends.
No, we just told the internet. That's all of our friends.
Okay.
All of my friends live on the internet.
They'll get it up on
it's fine.
On Reddit now.
Yeah, no, it'll be fine. Where was I? Oh yeah. So, you know, making these a holistic part of the game from day one was an important design goal.
It also had another effect that we wanted, because making them more modular also meant that we unified the structure a little more of some of the classes, which means that it is pretty easy to build a character and then you know the process for the next character you're building. So you're using the same basic structure, though you're making different choices. And Steve and I both worked on 4th edition D&D, and we liked a lot of stuff about that system, but one of the things that always dissatisfied me about it was the power structure meant that you're always getting the same type of thing for each character. And so we wanted like a similar structure where you're getting new things, but those decisions just have a much different effect, because the types of feats you're taking as a fighter are not the same types of feats you're taking as a cleric or as a druid. Yeah,
you never have to worry about them living in the same arena, because they are designed not to, and they speak specifically to what your character chassis is giving you anyway, right? So you don't have to worry about being like, oh, well, that power is better than this one. Because that's not how Pathfinder works. The wizard feats speak to spell casting and what you do with spells. The fighter feats speak to moving around and stabbing people with sharp pieces of metal.
That you may have shot off.
It's potato.
And if you're doing comparison, you're comparing things that are like the barbarian versus the fighter versus.
And those are already similar.
Right.
Yeah.
And each of those still has a really different play style in Pathfinder Second.
Exactly. So I think that was kind of one of the big driving goals, was to make sure that as we built the game, we were building it for the future as well.
Being modular also helps with that. I should have mentioned future proofing in the benefits, but it's absolutely true. It's going to be so much easier for us to get you more interesting and really evocative content. In the same way, it'll be easier for you to mod the game and create your own content.
And another one of our big goals was kind of removing some barriers, like things that were hard for new folks to understand, and often even experienced folks to understand. So like that modularity means when we slot something new in, you'll see where it goes and be like, oh, okay, I understand how that works. Rather than like a new system that has to swap out something that already existed in a weird way, which just kind of makes it a little more confusing, a little harder to use.
Or like skill uses in Pathfinder First, Jason talked about all of the progressions that are on your sheet. But like when you go to intimidate someone, you need to calculate a bespoke DC that is never used ever again or stored in any location of 10 plus a half their level, plus their wisdom modifier, plus their save bonuses against fear. And that's just there. I know what it is. Maybe you guys do too.
I didn't even know that anymore.
Yeah.
I purged that from my brain. No, I know I did.
I think you added the save against fear from that wasn't there in 3.5 or something like that.
So, now I'm just imagining a bespoke DC. So there's like some goblin, like clothier who comes out and is like, oh, yes, what would you like,
yes,
sir?
I've calculated your bespoke DC for you.
This is 7. What?
It's Sunday. We're out of the good jokes. What do you want? So I think this goes beyond just kind of general mechanics as well. Like, although I will say that one thing that has me excited about that is so much of this became one unified system in ways that allows a lot of this content to be used much more broadly. The way that archetypes are built now is you just sacrifice class feats to gain access. Well, everyone has class feats, and they all get them at about the same rate, which means everyone can take every archetype. We don't have to recreate the same archetype 7 times because we like the concept, but we want one for the barbarian and one for the rogue and one for the fighter. We can now just create the acrobat archetype and everyone can take it. Right. So if you're all playing, Extinction Curse, the second edition AP that's due out in about 6 months, and you're all part of a circus, you can all have the acrobat archetype. Although you won't be able to because it won't be out yet. But that's the thought, is that you can all take the archetype and you can still be a fighter, a cleric, a wizard, and a rogue, and doing the things the game needs you to do. But you can also have archetypes that make you cool and thematic and work well together as a group.
Or even for another really big example that we gave in the last panel, actually a question asked us in the last panel, to use guns in Pathfinder First Edition, there was the Holy Gun for the Paladin and the Spell Slinger for the Wizard, and there was just one of them in every class, more or less, and we wound up with printing almost an entire player companion's worth, if you gathered them together, of content that was only archetypes to use guns, many of which had similar abilities. So we can just do that in one.
Yeah, and we'll just call it guns.
Or it could be the gunslinger multi-class archetype, or
I guess we could do
the
that
gunslinger
well.
archetype, or something like that, right? So, and now we have space for 29, up to 29 more archetypes that was in the other space. So it lets us get you more content more quickly that you can use on your character, and you can be creative and tell the story of your character, and you don't need to rely on us to, oh, I'm glad they decided to pick the class I wanted to get guns. No, it's the class you want that gets guns.
Yeah, I think, 30 archetypes becomes 30 new options for every character, not one option for your character. I think that's one of the things we're really excited about. And that all comes back to us being able to sit down and look at the game from 10,000 feet and go, how can we make this game better and a better experience, not just at the table, but for all of you buying books and trying to absorb this game and trying to bring it to your friends and stuff. That's equally important. Hell, that may be even more important,
probably
right?
More.
That, you being able to get the most out of the things you get from us. I mean, Ultimate Combat was a great book, but if you were playing a, bard, there was not a lot in that book for you. Now, every archetype is something that you might be able to pull from. every time we release new ancestry feats, that might be something else you can pick up over time. That we tried to take that approach everywhere.
And condensing down the spell list is similar to that. It's like if we publish a new spell and your class hasn't come out yet, and it's much easier to be like, well, it's on that spell list, so I get a pretty good idea of whether I can take it or not.
Logan remembers that because he's the one who had to build the advanced class origin spell list that caught up all of the new classes, the advanced class guide to the older spells that were built before him.
Yeah, and by the end, we were producing spell chapters where it was like 30 pages long and 15 of it was spell lists because everybody had a spell list. Well, now we just have 4, right? And that
means more spells for everybody.
Exactly. More content for you, more things you can use at the table, more ideas to add to your characters.
And we have a strong kind of story thematic world link for how those spell lists are built, and therefore, it feels like a part of the story how that spell list works.
Yeah, and it goes beyond player characters too, right? I mean, we took a similar approach to monsters, traps, all of that has a similar kind of design philosophy of what can we do to make this an easier part of the game, an easier thing for everyone to work with, but still give you all of the richness and robustness that you come to expect from Pathfinder. So the monster math, we went away from building giant complex formulas that oftentimes were just there to be like, no, but I mean, really, it should be about plus 22. I mean, so keep fidgeting with it until it's plus 22.
Yeah, here's the formula to get your AC, and then also add a discretionary number like 8 to that.
Of natural
to get
armor.
to 22, because we really wanted it to be 22.
Yeah.
Because before, from a philosophy standpoint, we were building it bottom up in Pathfinder First Edition. You just started going into the minutia of the formulas, and you want a Fey warrior, and you build it up, and you took the number of hit dice it said in Bestiary 1 for a Fey of that level, and then you found out, oh, your Fey warrior is terrible. Its accuracy is 12 less than it was supposed to be because it had half base attack bonus. Now we have a top-down system. You're still going to be able to put tons of detail into your monster. You're going to be able to give them cool thematic abilities, but by going top-down, you start with your concept, Fey warrior, and that determines, rather than going from the bottom up, some minute numbers, that determines some of the top level numbers, so the Fey warrior is going to be able to be a Fey warrior. Right. Then from there are guidelines that build it down, and you still get all the same detail that you're used to, just from a direction that guarantees you don't have to go back to the drawing board when you're done.
And we're writing that stuff up for Game Mastery Guide. One of the things that we're trying to focus on is being more explicit about kind of the intentions of different things. So like that section on building monsters, the numbers are not that hard. It's all the other stuff that's hard. It's the art of it and how you make it really work for your game and get the feeling across you want in a battle. So that's what we're going to be spending a lot of those pages talking about, is how to tweak it so that it gets the right feel when it hits the table in your game.
And Logan just did a great job right before coming to the con, taking our sort of really sketchy, just for us and freelancers, notes about building a monster and turning it into something to teach you guys how to build it. I think you guys are going to love it when the Game Mastery Guide comes out.
If not before, I might try and push those out the door sooner.
That would be. I would.
They're
be
really important to everybody.
Really excited if you pushed it out the door sooner.
I think we'd all like to get those out of the door.
I can't make any promises to this regard right now. I want to look at our schedules when we get back to the office, but I may try and push the monster rules out the door a little faster as a PDF for everybody to start using, because
a lot
really
will depend on the rest of the pipeline whether
and that's the big challenge, right? I don't want to speak ex cathedra for when I have editors and layout folk who are like, excuse me, I'm busy.
But shortly, at least by the time we send off the final file, right? That doesn't get it any earlier for them.
We don't need to have the meeting up here. All right, I need you guys to all turn away so we can have a discussion.
You guys heard it here, folks.
So, it's Sunday. Yeah. So, going beyond things that are what came out now. Yesterday we also announced Bestiary 2, which is filled with a lot of great fun new monsters, things like the Ravener, things like Serpent Folk, Morlocks, the Grindilo, and Jabberwock is making an appearance with this book as well.
and
That's a sketch.
That
of the
is a
cover.
sketch of the cover.
Jason, did you tell them what type of dragons are signature dragons?
They are.
I know the answer, but did you tell them?
I did yesterday, but I can't remember.
They're the
when it
primal
was.
dragons,
Primal.
same as the last bestiary too.
can
But
probably-
that wasn't a guarantee. We actually went through a process like what dragons are the right ones this time. So chances are some of your favorite monsters, if they're not in the much expanded, longer bestiary one that has more monsters, chances are they're in here.
Yeah, so the book's going to contain, it's going to be another 320-page monster book taken together with Bestiary 1. We're going to give you 700 or 800 monsters total for your game. We felt that was really important. We kind of accelerated the timeline on this one because more monsters is more better, and it also really helps everyone who wants to convert adventure paths and things like that. This gives you the ability to do that sooner, because the easiest conversion job in Pathfinder Second Edition is just taking the new stats and plugging them in. I've been able to do that. Like, I can run modules on the fly that way, right? A year and a half ago, I ran Crypt of the Everflame for the Glass Cannon guys. I didn't do any work in advance for that. I just showed up and ran it. And
I
just
did a little work in advance.
Well,
for
all we did was sort out the stat block
Yes.
so that, because it was in a giant file. But it's not like I sat down and made new monsters or had to convert DCs or anything. I just did that all as we were playing. So that book is going to come out in spring 2020. But the thing that we are super excited about, and I'm sure that all of you are super excited about as well, is the Advanced Player's Guide for Second Edition. Now, this book, along with the Game Mastery Guide, the Core Rulebook, and Bestiary 1, kind of form what we consider to be the real heart of the system, the real core. I mean, you can add more bestiaries into that if you want, but the real heart of the Pathfinder role-playing game system is the Core Rulebook, the Advanced Player's Guide, the Game Mastery Guide, and the Bestiaries. And that's what we will, going forward, assume is kind of the heart of your table. We will assume that on the whole, most tables will use these 4 books, because that's the way it worked in first edition. Now, all the books that come after that, we're going to let you decide how you plug those into your game. That's a big thing that I'm still trying to puzzle out, and I don't want to go into too many details because we haven't announced any books beyond that. But some of this ties into how the rarity system works. Like, we built these pieces so that we could use them to help manage tables better as well. So pretty excited about that, but the Advanced Player's Guide is assumed to be kind of part of the core. And as such, it is filled with kind of more of what you expect from Pathfinder. It has 4 new classes in it. Sorry, I cut you off. It has 4 new classes in it. It has the investigator. I always nearly say the wrong one.
You got it right this time.
Yeah, no. It has the investigator, the witch, the oracle, and the swashbuckler. All 4 of those classes will be released for a public playtest this October, as soon as we get the time to design them. So we're really excited to get those classes out there, and why don't we talk a little bit about why we picked those? Yeah.
The one that we really kind of knew for sure was going to be in there from the start was the witch. And the witch was on the short list for the core rulebook as well, because we kind of knew we wanted another class. And it came down to like witch or alchemist were kind of
Oracle was in the running. It was the 3 of them.
So the witch, like, we kind of already knew going in was going to be in there. The investigator, we got in there because a lot of other classes that are out there, there's some kind of halfway mark you can get to with just the core rulebook. But the investigator needs a suite of abilities that's just really different to make it really work the way it's intended to. So we wanted to get that out in there early because we know there are going to be adventures that include investigation, and we want to make sure there's a character you can look at that's really good at that.
Well, for instance, the Edgewatch adventure path that's coming out at the same time as the Advanced Player's Guide, where you are all guards, right? That's a perfect one for that class.
Yeah, and it's just a really cool class.
Yeah.
Then the Oracle was one that we were kind of like. The other 2 are ones that were, I think, a little more in question for a lot of it, because there's so many options, so many classes that people want to see.
But
Mark,
the Oracle was a drastic fan favorite.
That's true.
And that's what won it out for the Oracle,
Yeah,
really.
part of our
because
surveys was asking which classes people wanted to see.
it was actually an earlier survey. It was
my sneaky one.
It was sneaky. It was a census of players that was not. It was before we had announced Second Edition that indicated that the Alchemist and the Oracle were almost neck and neck. They were not statistically significantly different in the number of players who used them, although there were a lot of like Oracle dips to abuse charisma, and so the Alchemist won out because people were actually playing the Alchemist.
Yeah, we saw what you did there. That's right.
So, but the Oracle beat out several core classes. The Witch was not even close in terms of what you guys played, but thematically for the world, it was still a very high up. It just didn't beat out several core classes. So the Oracle was in question, but thematically, but it was just so popular. Everyone was even saying, "Oh, I love Divine Sorcerer, but does that mean I won't get the Oracle?" So that's sort of how the Oracle got in.
Yeah, it's one of the classes that I think the thing I want to kind of stress to everyone is that, when we look at something like the Oracle, yeah, you're right. The Divine Sorcerer, a sorcerer who's casting off the Divine list, does kind of eat the lunch of the Oracle.
On like the most basic mechanical level,
yeah,
which is one of the things that we hear that a lot, but it's partially true, but there's a lot more to it.
Well, and it's also the thing that we have to change and make new anyway, right?
And they already had mysteries, they had curses. That's very different than the Bloodline.
And I got to be honest, the one thing that I wish I was able to do better in First Edition that we weren't able to do because of the way the mechanics were working at that time, was I really want them to have a curse. I kind of really want them to give their curse to other people.
There's a spell for that.
Yeah, no, I know there's a spell for it. I want to make it a class kind of signature.
It could be a focus
that
spell,
handing
so you
out
can do it every
curses
time.
is a thing that they do. That's just like, nope, here, have some curses.
Well, it's not like there's another class in there, the Witch, that is going to be upset about that.
Well,
there might be some more curses in the spells.
Yeah, exactly. We built a more robust system there. So all of these things we're going to be going back to the drawing board on, right? I mean, if you look at how the Barbarian works in First Edition and you look at how the Barbarian works in Second Edition, there are similarities, but we really took a new, fresh approach to it. So for these classes, we're going to do that as well. I'm also really excited to see that in the Swashbuckler. I think having a character that is super focused on mobility and skill use fighting is a cool niche. If you look at all the classes we added at First Edition, there weren't a lot of kind of pure combat characters. Most of them ended up being spellcasters when we were adding it, at least in some way, shape, or form. They had some amount of spellcasting. There weren't very many of them that were just like, nope, I don't cast spells. I'm just here to stab you with things. But the Swashbuckler was one of them, and I think that opens up some interesting opportunities for us.
To go back to give a broad but very quick discussion that you were talking about of the later books and how we want you to be able to handle it. I want to make it clear that when we say that the rarity system could be used to handle the later books, that doesn't mean that like you can't use them. It means if you're in a really experienced group, you can easily put in as maybe all the books, everything you want. But if you have a group with new players, there will be a way for you to make sure that people aren't intimidated and think, oh, we have to look through everything in order to even start getting started playing.
And also, if you want to theme your campaign, you might focus on one book to theme your campaign strongly after that book. So if I were to use First Edition books, for example, let's say we were going to do an entire adventure in,
Ustalav?
In Qadira.
Oh,
no,
okay.
Qadira is a great example. Ustalav would work as well. But let's say we were going to do an entire campaign in Qadira. I might say, all right, use the core books and use Ultimate Magic. Right? That's because it's a lot of high magic stuff. So everybody gets
maybe
access.
Ultimate Equipment because they have lots of markets in Qadira.
Yeah. But if I were going to do, okay, no, our next campaign's going to be in Ustalav, don't use much from Ultimate Magic. We're going to use a ton of stuff from Horror Adventures, right? And we kind of took that concept and brought it forward, and you can easily tie rarity into that to help control the flow of new rules into your game. And that doesn't mean you can't break it, though, right? You can say, oh, we're playing this Horror Adventures campaign. Everyone gets access to Horror Adventures. Everybody can take stuff from the Horror Adventures book. and somebody's like, but I want to play a character from the Dragon Empires. And you're like, okay, cool. Yeah, no problem. You can play the ninja and stuff from Ultimate Combat, but you don't get access to the Horror Adventure stuff to start. We'll give you access to that later, right? And that's an interesting way to push-pull the system so that things are evocative and flavorful, but you also don't have 4 linear feet of book that everybody needs to know for every game session.
Unless you want to.
Oh yeah, exactly. Unless that's the game you want.
You choose as a group what you want to deal with to your comfort level, and that way you can play the game and tell the story you want to tell.
And the rarity system speaks to another thing that we tried to do with this this edition, which is we gave it a name so that everybody can more easily understand what it is. Because we could have said in a book, like, in the intro text to this feats section, we said, these feats are normally only available to characters who come from Ustalav. But now we've introduced the rarity system, so everybody can be, well, that's uncommon, and everybody kind of knows what that means. And if you say, all uncommon options are available in my game, then everybody knows what that means. And the proficiency ranks are similar, because before you said, I have a +7. Well, what does that mean? Whereas I'm a master is much easier to just kind of understand from a surface level.
It's the Rumpelstiltskin principle, which is naming something gives you power over it.
You stole the words right out of my damn mouth. All right, no, but it is true, right? We did that over and over and over again, and it's like the reason why we've gotten a fair number of questions of why is everything called a feat? And I'm like, because then I only have to explain to you what a feat is once, and now you know what it is, and I don't have to explain a feat and a alternate racial trait, and a alternate class feature, and all of which are basically just doing the same thing, which is choose a thing instead of get a thing. And choosing a thing, the code word for that is feat. You get to pick a thing. That is it. The proficiency system, once again, we explained to you once, you're able to use it. The modes of play. We named it so that we could build rules around it without having to kind of sideways explain it. Oh, you can use this ability when you're not in combat. Well, that's kind of a clunky way of saying it. I mean, and it doesn't mean that at the table, your fighter is going through the dungeon and going, we are about to enter encounter mode, right? That's not how it actually works, but it allows us to speak about it to you in a way that makes sense and gives you an easier understanding of what we are talking about without having to give context or subtext.
Because if you're sneaking through a giant battlefield where a giant fight is going on in the background, then someone might say, well, are we in combat? If you just say, is it in combat? But it's clear you're not in encounter mode, you're in exploration mode until some of those warriors in the battle break off and start attacking you.
Exactly. So I think we've kind of pontificated enough. There's about 15 minutes left in this panel. So I want to open it up to questions. If you could, we'll ask you to queue up behind the microphone. I do want to let you know that if you speak on the microphone, you're speaking into Twitch. So everybody hears you, so,
And you'll be recorded forever.
That's right. So keep your language clean and your puns to a minimum. And we will take
Glass
some...
houses, Jason.
Yeah, don't pontificate, Jason.
Yeah, no, you're right. Did you say pontificate?
Yes.
Get out. No, all right.
Seminar's over.
Yeah, and that's it. Forget it. Mark ruined it. Blame him. So we'll also take some questions from all of you out there at Twitch in occasional intervals. So why don't we go right ahead?
Natural 20 doesn't automatically hit or save. Natural 1 doesn't automatically miss or fail. Why is that?
Oh, so this is really interesting. We had quite a bit of debate about this.
It was a late change.
It was a late change because originally we were just like, yep, 20 always hits, 1 always misses. And then we thought about it a bit and we're like, wait, is that actually the rule we want? Because it kind of is 20 always hits. I mean, except for if your attack would have been a miss, or a critical failure, then it's still just a miss. And we were like, wait, we just built an exception rule into the core mechanic of the game.
Right. Well, and you always start with that rule. It's like, a 20 is always a critical success. And then someone comes along and says, well, what if a farmer tries to attack a 20th level dragon? And then you have to be like, well,
the dragon looks at him funny and he dies.
There's bigger problems with just with skill checks, really, which is why in first edition Pathfinder skill checks didn't have that rule. But really, actually, I would say when it comes down to it, Jason's right. We had a big back and forth. I think that the winning factor was you guys by a lot, because just you guys during the playtest, I don't think we actually specifically asked a question about this, but in free response answers on the forums in person, you were all asking, because our rule, like Jason said, was 20 is a crit unless it wouldn't have even hit, and then it's a hit. And it's like, that's really complicated, and also it doesn't work great if it would have been a critical failure. Can't it just increase the degree of success by 1 or decrease on a 1? And that had actually been one of our prototypes that nearly made it into the playtest already.
Yeah.
So
and it's one of those things, it's like, it's a simpler rule to understand for most people, and 99% of the time the rule is the same, so we might as well go with the same.
and the times that it isn't, it's a little better for the story.
So as one of the big people in the office, I was
Literally one of the big people.
yeah, no, I was pushing for this change because it was a more elegant solution. It said whenever you roll a die, you always do this thing, and that thing is add your bonus, compare it to the DC. That is always the thing that you do. When you roll a 20 under the previous system, we short-circuited that in a weird way. We said, nope, it automatically hits. But I mean, I guess you could do the math sometimes and maybe it might not hit. What? No, this is the, tell everyone to do the same thing that they always do and then add an addendum to it that slightly alters it, right? So it's like, no, still do the comparison and then just upgrade the success by 1 category or downgrade the success by 1 category. That's a cleaner way of doing it because I'm still asking you to do the same thing I always ask you to do, which is the thing we want everyone to be trained to do, which is roll the die, add the number, say it. GM says, that's a hit, that's a miss, and you go, but it was a 20, so it's a critical hit. Great, we're talking the same language. Next.
What's the one thing from first edition that you would like to see into second edition that either didn't make it or hasn't made it into it yet?
I don't know.
Don't say words of power. Don't say words of power.
Words of power. No, no, not words of power. Oh, geez. I have a deep love for Mythic. I know it's not for everyone, but I really love some of the crazy gonzo stuff it allowed you to do. And I would love to see that find its way into the new edition. And I think the new system actually probably makes that easier than ever for us to do kind of crazy fun stuff, because it's like, oh yeah, no, and now you get mythic feats. I don't know what they do, but they're awesome. Here, get some.
Maybe it comes after legendary. Who knows?
Yeah. After legendary, there could be a mythic rank of proficiency. Like, there's easy ways that we can just start bolting that into the system. That's one of the things I love about the way the game is built now, is that it's easy for me to look at systems like that and go, oh, that's how we would do that. Like, I know right now how we would do mythic. It's the path through is obvious to me.
There's a few possibilities to travel that path, probably.
Yeah, no, there's different ways we could do it, but
it's really easy to figure out starting points.
Yeah, the starting points are pretty simple, and now we just need to find the time to do them.
So I've seen a lot of questions around this topic all past 4 days. So I'm going to give you one from Templar's Knight. He says, "Greetings from Germany. You're doing awesome work. Quick question, will the Cavalier appear as an archetype in the APG?"
We don't know yet. So we did a meeting about the APG archetypes and got a whole ton of suggestions from our coworkers about things that might go in that book. But we also kind of told, oh, Jason's looking at them. Are you going to name drop something? No, don't do it yet.
The Cavalier was on the list.
Well, it was not on the list because the way we led off the meeting was saying, don't suggest any of the existing classes because we know we're going to look at every single one of them throughout this process and see if it should be an archetype or not. We did, I believe we asked about this in the survey, and people were pretty okay with the Cavalier just being an archetype. So that's one we actually have some player feedback on.
It was very strong. When you added up the people who said, I'm okay with a lot of the old classes becoming archetypes if it fits, and the people who said, not usually, but just the Cavalier, yes, it added up to almost 80% of everybody.
Yeah, raise your hand if you would be okay with the Cavalier being an archetype.
Yeah.
And if you're on Twitch, spam the chat with...
Did you
no, Twitch, please don't spam the chat.
It's too late. We've ruined it for everyone. No, so we did this giant brainstorm, and many of these, many of the awesome things on this list are going to probably be archetypes. There's a handful of things that I'm like, why did we MacGyver, is that an archetype? I
Yeah,
guess. Yeah,
that
sure.
that's a
Yeah,
good
yeah.
archetype.
Yeah, no. Yeah. You get a feat that's
Only
called
name the ones that-
bubblegum and twine.
Only name the ones that don't make any sense. None of the ones that's like, oh.
Yeah, no.
actually
This
do
is
that.
like name the archetypes in the Advanced Player's Guide. Wrong answers only.
Yeah.
MacGyver, I think, is actually a good archetype, and that came from our art team.
We might need to.
No, I'm not saying that we couldn't make it
some
work, but
licensing.
there's some licensing problems.
Oh, yeah,
We could probably get MacGruber a lot
It
easier.
shouldn't be called MacGyver. It could be called like
Yeah.
clever.
No, but there's a
improviser.
lot of things on here that I can.
That's a feat.
I just looking at them, I'm like, yeah, we're going to end up writing that, right? So things like pirate, acrobat, duelist, martial artist, beastmaster, gladiator, trapmaster, poisoner, bounty hunter. All of these are like
They're on the short list.
Some
they're
of
on
them
the
are
short list.
backgrounds already.
Yeah.
At least one of them has already been written.
Yeah. So I think looking at them, we're like, there's a lot of great ideas in there. We're still in the process. We're a year out, so this stuff hasn't fully gotten started yet, but it's about to. And in the coming weeks and months, we're going to be talking a lot more about it. And with the 4 classes at the very least, we're going to open up a playtest. So that should be fun. Next.
Hi. Me and my group have been going over the book, and we're very excited to get to be playing it. But the one thing that caught us off guard and are slightly concerned about is the way proficiencies work specifically, and then it feels because essentially everyone's adding their level to both to hit and AC.
Yeah.
So it feels more like you're putting just like an extra layer of math onto the players instead of just
Sure.
It's essentially, as a GM, I feel like just taking that number away from all the monsters and just rolling it to make it simpler.
Well,
Why was that
as
decision made that way?
As I discussed earlier in the panel, you could, but it has a pretty big side effect. You're looking at 5th level PCs against a 5th level monster, but that's not all that a 5th level PC will fight. They will fight 6th, 7th, 8th level boss monsters. They fight 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 1st, even maybe level 0 or -1 weaker monsters. And the fact that you're adding that is what makes it so that in this game you don't have like a designation of solo or boss or minion or elite on the monsters. You don't need that. You can just use the same ogre that used to be the boss your 1st level PCs fought, and it can be this mook that they just wipe off the map when they're level 7. That's because of the scaling. Yes, sure, they're the same when they're at the same level. If you remove it, you'll tell a story like the one with the 8 bandits who are big threat to the Swordmaster, but you can.
And
You
we're
could.
going to have more advice on that in the Game Mastery Guide about like I want to remove this and kind of the effects that has on your play.
Yeah.
Yep, it's one
Really-
of the variants in there.
Really, what it does is the adding your level allows the game phase to change as you go up in level, because the formula. This isn't obvious and this is super techy. The formula for AC versus attack rolls for high melee accuracy characters is not 1 for 1. It's not the AC of the monsters doesn't go up by 1 every time the fighter gets another level, right? There's a bit of a scale there that allows the fighter's first attack to become more and more accurate over time. But that's a function of how the level and stuff plays into those numbers. It's not as clear cut as just like, oh yeah, no, it's just they're the same. They're not the same. There is a shift and change over time because we allow other bonuses to sneak in there, and we allow the scale and the order to shift, especially on the monster side of the math. And what that allows us to do is have your games like this, the math formula equates to your play experience. So at low levels, the die roll is super important because you're low level, and that the feel of that is that you're living on the edge of your seat because you're not good at this yet. You just picked up the sword from the blacksmith and are going out being an adventurer. And maybe you'll come back a hero, or maybe you'll come back in a box, and you don't know yet. But as you go up in level, you become more assured. What you attempt to do becomes more and more certain. That's why your level adds to those things, because as you go up in level, you become better and better and better. It allows you to take on more challenging things, but it also means that the things that you faced before are now easy. And the level is the prime way that those things fall back. So if that makes sense, that's why it's in there.
Yeah, thanks. You sold me.
All right. Done.
One more.
You mentioned a number of things from 1st edition that we all know and love and we like to see again. How much work is being put into recreating the first edition stuff we love in second edition, as opposed to all new, special, and different in second edition?
That's a really good question. That's something we have to.
We're struggling
struggle
with
a lot,
that, yeah.
because the demand is really high to get the older stuff back in there. I think one of the things you'll see is a book like Advanced Player's Guide is more focused on, particularly with the classes, and getting classics back in there. Whereas like the Ancestries is a little more flexible, and then we know in like spells, we're probably gonna have a whole bunch of brand new stuff, and magic items we're probably gonna have a whole bunch of brand new stuff. And also in lines other than like the kind of hardcover rulebook line, I think we're being a lot more flexible and not necessarily trying to get all Pathfinder 1 stuff over, but kind of looking at the theme of the book and really going hard on that theme, whatever makes the most sense for that product.
And the archetypes you heard Jason say included some that were archetypes that you probably haven't seen before. So it's always a discussion. In fact, there was some ideas for a new class that could have been in the Advanced Player's Guide instead of the Swashbuckler, but the Swashbuckler resoundingly won out in the end. But it wasn't like we were like, oh no, there can't be a new one in here. It was on. It was on the whiteboard.
And there was some discussion of like, will this book be more appealing to people if it has a brand new class in it? That's something they haven't entirely seen before, and that's where it always has to fight. Like, well, I got this new class, but I could have had, you know, the Oracle or the Summoner or whatever somebody has in their head that they think would be.
Would it make people just dislike the new class because they just imagine which old class it could have been that
Don't
was
put
whatever
that in
their
their
favorite?
head.
So just don't do it.
So
don't do it.
Oh,
then we'll
don't
get
do
new
the
classes.
thing you just told them about. Great. We're gonna rapid fire these last two questions and we'll call it good. So we'll just keep it quick.
You mentioned the trapper class of some kind, potentially, archetype.
Maybe, yeah.
Are traps and poisons and things like that going to be more accessible to the PCs? Because in past edition, they were just...
So
we have a few of those in the core rulebook.
Well, and there's a big
Snares
thing
for
in the
Ranger.
core rulebook, which are snares, which are easy to set up, quick traps that you can throw around the battlefield. So we want to make those a bigger part of the game. Poisons are now more in alchemy. We're adding more alchemical things to the game. So yes, in both ways.
Cool. Thank you.
Last question. Make it a good one.
Okay, so I was interested in something you mentioned around the individual archetypes, especially around like the gunslinger. This doesn't apply to the gunslinger specifically, and I also haven't poured through the core rulebook yet, so I don't know if there's already an answer to this. But one of the more interesting things about individual archetypes per class was the fact that you can have a lot of abilities that are do this while this, such as with the gunslinger wizard being able to cast spells through your gun. How can this be addressed with some of the now separated archetypes that you're going to be having?
So the way that the new archetypes work that allows for this is that essentially something really cool that we could never do with the old archetypes. Let's say we have a new archetype that's super popular, like the archaeologist was in first edition Pathfinder. In first edition Pathfinder, once you've written an archetype, you've written it. It's out there.
You would have had to make an archetype to change the archetype.
Yes, but in second edition, we can, and in fact have, in Lost Omens Characters Guide has done this with the ones in Lost Omens World Guide. You can just publish new feats that are for a beloved archetype that came out before. So let's say there was like gun person was the name of an archetype, and
This is why we have editors, everybody.
Yeah, no, it's true. And developers.
and so we have gun person, and it has some gun abilities, and people say, well, we like gun person, but what if we could have magic? So we have a choice. We could put out the gun mage as a different archetype, but we could put out gun person feats that are like, here's some new gun person feats that use magic, and they require prerequisite some spell casting, and are in the gun person archetype, and are like, now you can shoot through your gun if you're a wizard, but also a sorcerer or other kind of casters. So it has that, but is even more powerful because it can fit for not just the wizard.
Well, I want to thank you all for coming. This was our last P2 panel here of Gen Con. There's still more Paizo panels to come up. I want to thank you all for watching and being here. I hope you have a great Gen Con 2019. If you want to see more of Pathfinder 2 on our Twitch channel, I'm going to do my plug. I do run a office game called Oblivion Oath. I hope you check that out. That's Thursdays at noon on the Paizo Twitch channel. And we just launched a show called Knights of Everflame on Geek and Sundry. which is a Pathfinder 2 show over there, and that'll be on the Geek and Sundry Twitch channel every Tuesday, and then loaded up to their YouTube channel every Tuesday after that. So check it out. And thank you for coming, everybody. I hope you all have a great Gen Con. We will see you next time.